just go through some of the main elements of where we are in the social protection and labor strategy formulation now, pick up on some of those main points, and really highlight the areas of resonance, and I think you'll see there are many of them between the social safety net report that you just heard about and what we are focused on today in terms of the strategy development. So let me start with just a brief introduction. In the World Bank today, we're in the process of formulating a new social protection and labor strategy, which is a global strategy that will guide the social protection and labor practice over the next 10 years. This is the first time that we've gone through this exercise since the sector was established 10 years ago. And this is something that we do on a fairly regular basis at the World Bank, as in many other places. And so we are really taking stock of where we are today after 10 years of work in this area of social protection and labor. And it's been extremely helpful to have the social safety net report really provide a critical input to that stock taking. And as you'll see, there's a great deal of resonance between some of the areas of focus emerging for the strategy and the safety net report. We began this exercise in January, where we had a concept note that was approved by the World Bank Board's Committee for Development Effectiveness, and we then spent 6 months doing very intensive global consultations around the concept note, and already spoke with many of you, and thank you for the support from ODI and others that has received. We had 36 consultation events. We touched base with 43 client and donor countries and engaged over 1,300 participants. We also had an online forum and a discussion blog that reached over 300 respondents, and we've received engagement and comments from multiple stakeholders, including government counterparts, civil society, trade unions, academics, think tanks, the private sector, and development agencies. So it's been a very rich dialogue, and I'll refer to some of the results of that. Looking forward, where we are now is we're in a second stage where, again, the board's Committee on Development Effectiveness has approved a basic outline and main points, which is what I shared with you when I sent the PowerPoint, and what's also available on our website. And we are now doing some focused discussions that will lead to inputs to a full draft strategy that we will have available in the beginning of 2012, and again to present to the board, to receive some feedback on that, and to finalize in the early part of next year. So that's where we are in the process. Let me spend a few minutes telling you about the content of the work, and then I think it'll be most interesting to receive questions and comments that Jenny can of course answer, and I will kick in as well. In the strategy, we have felt that we had a strong intellectual framework, but we are very focused on our operational work, because now, unlike 10 years ago, the World Bank has a strong global practice in social protection, and indeed, as we all can appreciate, there's a particular historical moment and historical opportunity with the waves of crises that we have been experiencing, and the very clear need to have more effective social protection and labor policies and programs in place to be able to more effectively respond to those crises and to address the continuing very important needs of the chronic poor as well. And so what we have done, picking up on a lot of the existing literature, including from ODI and IDS and many of you participating today, is we have picked up on and adapted what we call the 3P framework of prevention, protection, and promotion. So prevention, with the aim of providing security and ensuring against risk, and this picks up on a lot of the areas in our practice in the World Bank that have to do with social insurance, notably in the pension area. Then protection, the second P, is about enhancing equity and alleviating poverty and destitution. So this is very strongly oriented toward the safety net work and the social assistance work that you just heard about from Jenny. And then very importantly, and somewhat newer in terms of its emphasis, is the area of promotion. And this is extremely important to be seen in the context of social protection and labor work, and it has to do with promoting opportunities. And it's opportunities that can be achieved through improving human capital, also labor markets and productivity. So this is the labor side of our practice, but also importantly, it's what ties into all of the elements of the social protection and labor practice that have to do with building skills, with building human capital, and with access to opportunities. So that 3P framework provides sort of an overall framing for this very strong operational orientation for the strategy. Then I'd also like to highlight what are 4 areas of focus that we highlighted in our concept note and reflect a little bit on the kind of feedback that we received with these extensive consultations and really where we're going now in light of that feedback on the 4 areas of focus. So we had identified 4 global gaps in the social protection and labor practice globally, not just within the bank, but really in the practice globally, but where the World Bank, in collaboration with clients, might think of orienting its work. That first gap, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the feedback, was in the area of having fragmentation really across programs and across policies, and we felt that it would be important to address that fragmentation by building appropriate country-specific social protection systems. So that was really the first gap and the proposed area of focus. The second was on coverage of social protection and labor programs and systems, particularly in low-income countries and fragile states. The third gap was this weak link to productivity and to promotion, so it was to include that third P quite deliberately in the focus and to promote links to human capital, skills, and labor market insertion. So not just having the focus on prevention and protection, but very much including that focus on promotion. And the last gap was in terms of knowledge and the need to invest further in results and in knowledge sharing. So what was the feedback that we received in the consultations on those areas? The first is that there was an extremely strong endorsement about the need to focus on social protection systems, particularly to address fragmentation and to address crisis response through fiscally sustainable country-led approaches. And each of those is important. The issues of fragmentation in terms of what is seen actually on the ground in countries where there are often very uncoordinated approaches and strategies. And this will resonate with a lot of you in the audience because it's been quite germane to a lot of the social protection debate today. To incorporate crisis response, the IEG report that you just heard from Jenny speaks very eloquently to this and to the fact that those countries that have programs and systems in place before the crisis hits are more able to effectively respond to crises through a fiscally sustainable and country-led approach, because it is important to look at the fiscal elements and the sustainability of these efforts. And it's important to recognize that any social protection and labor policy or system or set of programs is going to be very closely derived and tied to the social compact in a country and to their the aspirations of its citizens and their understanding of how these types of programs and systems will function in that given environment. The second area, which we had proposed was in the concept note, was expanding coverage, particularly in low-income countries and fragile states. And you saw in the IEG report that there was certainly room for some of that expansion in terms of World Bank engagement in our portfolio. What we found, though, was a very strong caveat to this proposal, which is that the focus should not imply less attention to middle-income countries, particularly vulnerable populations in middle-income countries, that the bulk of the poor are still the majority of the poor are still in middle-income countries, that there are important lessons to be learned in particularly working with low-income populations in middle-income countries that have implications for improving work in low-income countries. And so what needs to be done is to, yes, focus more on engagement in low-income countries and fragile states, but not at the expense of lessening engagement in middle-income country areas. Third was this urge to have links to human capital, skills, and labor market insertion. And this did have a particular resonance given the jobs crisis going on today. And the new World Bank Development Report that will be, that is currently being written is going to be on jobs, and there's a real recognition that in fact a job is the best form of protection that a household can have, and that it's important not just to look at formal sector employment, but in fact at raising productivity even in the informal sector, and that the poor, if they are able to do so, cannot afford to be idle. So one real challenge is to simply raise the productivity and the returns to that kind of engagement through building skills and through building human capital, and recognizing that a lot of the work that we do in the social protection and labor sector is really about the supply side of the labor market and what one can do in terms of investing in people so that they are more productive and better able to take advantage of those opportunities. And then last but certainly not least, there was a strong endorsement of additional investments in results and in knowledge. We do have a good start on building a strong evidence base through some of the impact evaluations, particularly in conditional cash transfers, as Jenny mentioned, and there was an excellent IEG report that was produced as part of the safety nets evaluation that pulls a lot of that together, that has a lot of resonance with the DFID paper that's recently also been done on safety nets. But we recognize that the evidence available needs to be expanded, that it's focused in particular areas, and that it's extremely important for development institutions and, very importantly, our clients to have access to this kind of knowledge to be able to inform their policies and their strategies. And a very strong endorsement also in the consultation of the role that the World Bank, together with partners, can play in knowledge sharing, and that often it's not just a question of sort of synthesizing knowledge or producing knowledge, but making knowledge accessible to a wider range of stakeholders, and really playing a role also as knowledge brokers. So that was all very important in terms of where then we are going today in terms of the direction of the strategy. So keeping these 4 areas of focus around systems, around expanding coverage, but not only in low-income countries and fragile states, around these links to productivity through human capital, skills, and labor market insertion, and finally, last but not least, this expanded investment in results and knowledge. So let me spend a few minutes just on 2 more elements, and then we can open it up to some engaging discussion. I want to focus on 2 additional elements, and all of this again is in the PowerPoint that I had circulated. One is this key question of systems, because I think it's central to the new strategy, and it's something where I think we would also welcome some discussion. So one of the areas that's been put forward, and we would welcome comments around systems and around trying to understand what this concept of systems actually means, is an approach to systems that looks toward building inclusive, smart systems. Now, inclusive systems is really a goal, that these types of systems that would include functions in prevention, protection, and promotion would be able to reach the right people with the right services at the right time. And what would it take to do that? What would be some of the features of these inclusive systems? What we've proposed is a little sort of mnemonic of having smart systems, with the S being for synchronized, so that there would be different tools and programs that are connected and working well with each other with overall policy coordination, so looking at the incentive structure between and across programs and how those work to respond effectively to crises and to shocks and play an effective role in risk management. So that's the S in SMART. The M is measurable, so that these systems are in fact monitored and evaluated and very importantly adapted, so that the results are actually used to inform reforms and evolution of the programs. Third, the A in SMART is affordable, so this emphasis on being fiscally sustainable and efficient. And this is very important, particularly in the context of the dialogue in low-income countries. This came out very strongly as a key feature. The R is responsive, and this is particularly true in response to crises. So again, this link with the IEG report. And the T in SMART is transparent and accountable. So speaking to governance issues, that they have the right rules, roles, and controls, that there be a strong emphasis on governance and on accountability within the systems. So that's sort of a beginning framework, realizing that this is being developed now. Let me also mention for the strategy, there are a series of background papers, of 10 background papers that are currently being finalized, including one on systems and governance. And those will be available soon, and we'll be sharing drafts of those and posting them on our websites. And one of the key elements, particularly in the systems paper, is this idea, first of all, that you have to adapt systems to particular contexts so that they will look different in different countries given their institutional capacity, given the social compact at play, but that in all cases there will need to be sort of 3 levels at which one will look at for systems. One is the overall policy framing level, sort of this macro level, looking at policy coordination, looking to ensure equity, efficiency, and incentive compatibility, and looking at this key question of how the system fits into the social compact. At sort of the middle level is the level of program coordination, which is looking at how programs can work in coordination with one another to address particular risks, to be responsive, and to also have these promotion aspects. So working not only on the insurance functions and the insistence functions, but also looking at what are the links to the labor markets, what are the links with the supply side, particularly in health and education, so that those who can build those pathways up and out of poverty are able to do so. And then the last and most basic level within systems is this sort of nuts and bolts tools level, which is often an area where the World Bank and many partners engage, which is about building subsystems to provide some of the basic functions. And this can be in terms, for example, in safety nets of payment systems, of identifying and registering people so that they are eligible to receive benefits. It can be around monitoring and evaluation systems. So it's the basic nuts and bolts tools, often administrative tools, and building blocks that can serve one or more programs and can even serve almost as an entry point into more effective program coordination on that next level, because they provide that information and the basic building blocks to program managers, to development agencies, so that the arena in which these programs are operating is clearer and provide those types of vehicles. So that was what I wanted to share on systems. Let me just end with an element that we see as very important, and I wanted to end on this given the audience present today, and many thanks to ODI for putting this wonderful team of people together. What I'd like to end on is a challenge, and it's a challenge that we put forward in the strategy, but it's really a challenge to all of us and a challenge that many of you have also previously identified. And the challenge is the following. How do we, particularly in the donor community, provide support to clients? So what are the types of partnerships that we as external partners can provide to clients for building these effective country-led systems? What can global partners do? What can we do in terms of coordination in order to help the development objectives that are so critical in this area of social protection today? And we've identified a few areas that I'd just like to share with you and leave then as a point of discussion. One is about building these systems on the three levels, right? These nuts and bolts, administrative areas, around program coordination and around policy coordination. And we think this is particularly salient in low-income countries and fragile states where the presence of donors is often not as coordinated as it needs to be, and where often there are smaller, uncoordinated, donor-driven programs. And what can we do in this area to also strengthen client capacity so that these systems can be established? Second is in the area of coordinating implementation so that we can be better aligned in terms of donor policy and support to country policies to better align social protection and labor systems. How can we use these common nuts and bolts tools across different programs and not have different agencies working in parallel with one another? And how can there be sustainable, scalable programs that are put in place as opposed to boutique pilots, which are often less able to respond to crises and work together in a coordinated fashion? And finally, last but not least, how do we effectively monitor and evaluate results? What can we do in the donor community to systematically invest in those results through strong monitoring and evaluation systems? What kind of information and data can be put in place to support clients and to allow them, as well as many people in the donor community, to be more informed about the successes and areas of improvements in terms of the programs and policies that are being supported. So let me end there. You have access to the PowerPoint. I think as you've seen, there are elements that resonate strongly with the Social Safety Nets report that Jenny presented from IEG. It's been terrific to have that report as an input to the strategy, and I think you'll see that in the 4 areas of the main messages of that report about building the institutions during stable times to reach the poor and respond to crises, that's very much in line with this systems agenda that's at the center of the social protection and labor strategy. The second area that Jenny highlighted about the potential for safety nets in low-income countries is very much this idea of expanding coverage and recognizing that that is a particular need in low-income countries and the need for coordination. That the results frameworks need sharpening is in line with investing in knowledge and results. And strategic engagement being important for effectiveness is really the challenge put forward not only for the World Bank, but I think we would all argue for the donor community at large so that we can work together more effectively on behalf of our clients. So thank you very much, Rachel, Tim, Jenny, and all of you for inviting me to participate virtually from Washington.